Hi! Welcome to another episode of Thanks to You. Editing Dan here. I can't believe this is the second video that I forgot to explain what this video series is about. But in order to thank all the booktubers that have made me the reader that I am today, I've decided to do this video series in order to read books they have recommended to me, whether it be books they actually love, hate, or just simply recommended. So let's get on with the video. And on today's episode, we'll be reading The Spear Cuts Through Water by Jimenez. And this is not technically recommended this time, but I found it on Tammie's channel from Tammie Tries to Read. Tammie started her booktube channel in 2020, and that's around the time that I started watching her. She often does vlogs and reading vlogs and reading wrap-ups and sometimes book recommendation videos. The main reason why I fell in love with Tammie's channel was because she was really dead in love with The Grace of Kings. And I was super interested in reading the Dandelion Dynasty series, and that really made me want to subscribe to her. I really enjoy her reading vlogs, and this is actually where I found The Spear Cuts Through Water when she was reading this for one of her vlogs. She, I think, did not finish this based on my memory, but I'm intrigued enough to just continue this on my own. Other than her booktube channel, Tammie actually does have a channel for her Nintendo Switch games, and that's a channel that she actually started in 2022. I go to Tammie for Switch game recommendations. She has the best Switch game recommendations. But otherwise, what is The Spear Cuts Through Water about? I'm not too sure, actually. I shall just read off this thing, okay? The people suffer under the centuries-long rule of the Moon Throne. The royal family, the despotic emperor and his monstrous sons, the three terrors, hold the countryside in their choking grip. They bleed the land and oppress the citizens with the frightful powers they inherited from the god locked under the palace. But that god cannot be contained forever. With the aid of June, a guard broken by his guilt-stricken past, and Kima, an outcast fighting for his life, the god escapes from her royal captivity and flees from her own children, the triplet terrors who would drag her back to her unholy prison. Ooh. And so it is that she embarks with her young companions on a 5-day pilgrimage in search of freedom and a way to end the Moon Throne forever. The journey ahead will be more dangerous than any of them could have imagined. Both a sweeping adventure story and an intimate exploration of identity, legacy, and belonging. The Spear Cuts Through Water is an ambitious and profound saga that will transport and transform you, and it is like nothing you have ever read before. Doesn't that sound amazing? Goddess involved two young heroes who will help her in her adventures. That sounds amazing to me. So I'll keep you guys updated, but otherwise, please enjoy the vlog. Let's play some Xenoblade 3 and listen to Stray Kids in honor of Tammie. Let's go. I'm currently about 200 pages into The Spear Cuts Through Water, and at first, at about the 50-page mark, I thought that I was gonna give this like 2 stars because it was insanely confusing. We had first person narrative, second person narrative, third person narrative, all in a single page. I was so confused. I thought my brain could not keep up with this book. But as it kind of rolled into the 100 pages mark and so on and so forth, I got used to it. 1, 2, it became clear to me which perspective is which. So let me try to describe what The Spear Cuts Through Water is about. We follow a second person narrative at the start. So it seems like we're following a boy who's getting told a story about these 2 warriors, sort of, who are escorting a moon goddess. So that's our second perspective that links up into our third person narrative, which is the story that we're supposed to follow, which is our 2 boys, June, who is like a guard with a past that he doesn't want to talk about, and 2, Kima, from like a disgraced warrior from a tribe sort of thing. But we don't know much about them yet, but we just know they've been assigned to take care of this goddess and travel over 5 days to reach somewhere that she needs to go. Where exactly? Not too sure. For what exactly? Not too sure. But she was trapped in the castle of the ruling party, and she's actually like the mom. She's the wife to the emperor and the mom to her 3 sons, who are like terrors in your own rights. And because she's a goddess, sort of, she has granted, and she's sort of been captured. She granted like the emperor and her 3 sons powers because she's a goddess. And so it seems like, at least for one of the sons we have met, he can like move earth and water and whatsoever. Like he has some sort of elemental magic. It is a bit scary, and he's actually really scary. Like I think the author did such a like excellent job portraying this actually evil person. At first, it is confusing because we have our third person narrative, and suddenly the second person narrative will just interject, and then you get confused. You're like, wait. Is the second person narrative like actually one of these characters, or what's going on? But you realize that it's just one of the descendants, sort of. It's just one of a little boy years and years later who is receiving this story from his grandma. And then we have first person narratives interjected too into the same page. So we can have one full page with third person narrative, second person narrative, and first person narrative. And in the first person narrative, it's like thoughts of the people in the book. So I read up about it because I was so curious. I was like, okay, why is Simon Jimenez writing like this? Like, what is the reason? And I read on a Wikipedia page, probably not the best source, but that's all I could find. He didn't have interviews, okay? So in the Wikipedia page, we see that the first person narrative is sort of like a Greek chorus. I was like, what's a Greek chorus? Because I don't read like many Greek mythology, so I don't know. So we hear their thoughts on page, what they think, what they are afraid of at the moment, or what they're exactly thinking of the situation. And though it was confusing, I sort of enjoy it now at the 200 pages mark. I sort of enjoy it. I just want to preface it because I feel like I think a lot of people might give up on this book early because of that reason. But once the story starts rolling, you do start to enjoy and appreciate the prose. That's what I feel. Yeah. And I just want to say I'm reading the audiobook with the physical book as well, and that's really helping me a lot because our audiobook narrator is really good. He makes voices that suits the characters and gives like a lot of like intrigue and personality to them. So it's not just monotonous. There is like some personality. At parts where the text is all in caps, he will shout, and I think I appreciate that a lot. It does get me immersed into the story and focused, like laser focused on reading it. Yeah, so I do recommend it for people who, if you guys are, any of you guys are reading The Spear Cuts Through Water and are struggling, please do pick up the audiobook. It might help you a little bit more. I was, like I said, a little bit confused by that, but now I'm thoroughly enjoying that aspect. It does paint a scene like super well in my head. Oh, and another thing I want to mention is that this is a Filipino fantasy. Can we talk about how we don't really have that? I love it. Although I find it hard to picture how the characters will look like exactly because our author doesn't really describe them. But Filipino fantasy, not that it really changes anything because I don't know anything about Filipino mythology, but I I like that. I like that. I think it's good to have representation. I like East Asian fantasy a lot. So that's why I always veer towards that side. And I'm just so glad that this is Filipino. I don't know why. Otherwise, I'll keep you guys updated. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna read a lot more because I'm kind of invested in the story as a current. And yes, this is my thoughts so far. See ya. I can't remember what I updated you guys about last time, but I'm already about 279 pages into this and thoroughly enjoying myself. Now that I got used to the prose, I'm really enjoying the story itself. It's really mythical. It feels like those fairy tales. In fact, it does really feel like a fairy tale. And I've tapped some things that I really enjoy or that I wanted to showcase. Hold on. Some of it is just to showcase to you like what exactly is the prose about, which you can see. Like, I hope I'm not spoiling you, but essentially you can see that the first person and second person and third person narrative can all be found in a single page sometimes, and it's really confusing. But I want to most importantly talk about this particular line that I read, and it's just so, it hit home for me. But the truth of the matter was they fought. Because June was grieving and Kima was terrified. And June was exhilarated and Kima was joyful. And June was exhausted and Kima was repulsed. They fought because it was the easiest language they spoke. I don't know whether that hit home for anyone, but that truly hit home for me when I read that particular passage. I find his writing is truly beautiful. There is like depth to it that I feel hard. I don't know how to explain. I'm not good at this, but so far with the story, I'm at a part where Jun and Kima are reaching their goals a little bit further, but they're kind of getting tricked by some people, and I'm scared of where we are progressing. But we're seeing that bond between the two of them, and it's kind of nice. Like two young boys put into a situation where they have never otherwise known, and becoming friends or people that connect deeply with each other because they're going through the same things. I also want to highlight a certain part that I noticed, not I noticed, but I want to highlight a certain part where actually Kima comes across some pornographic material, porno magazines of some sort, and he happened to sort of pickpocket it, and he pickpocketed a gay magazine. I don't know if that's foreshadowing to his sexuality of some sort, but I'm assuming that it is. But if Kima is gay, I'll like that. But otherwise, I actually don't have much to update because I think it's kind of hard to describe the story without spoiling it. So I can only talk about the characters and the prose truly in the process. But I think the next time I update you would be when I finish this book, and then we can wrap up this vlog. Okay, bye. it's time to close out the vlog. I like this, as you can tell. Look at all these tabs. That's a lot of tabs for me because I don't tab my books. And this is a library copy, come on. So why did I like it so much? At first, like I said, I didn't really enjoy the book because of the way that the story is told. There's first person, second person, and third person narrative. At first, I felt like it was a bit annoying. Like I couldn't understand where our perspectives were coming from, and I couldn't differentiate the difference between the perspectives at all. But as I progressed and I got used to the perspectives, I fully understood the story from the various aspects that are being written. Ultimately, because the story is like being portrayed as if it is a play in a theater, the entire story does feel that way. Because of the Greek chorus, like I told you before, sometimes it feels like the story is like a script or a play where characters are standing on the same plane for the play, and when it is their turn to speak or to think, a spotlight will shine on them and you hear the thoughts, like a Greek chorus. So it does feel like a script and play in that aspect. But ultimately, the story does feel like a mythology. It feels like the author actually took real life myths and placed it into his story, and we are actually following an encounter of a myth or a historical event that happened in real life and how it has impacted and grown from when it happened to centuries later when we are in our now. And so that aspect I really enjoyed because it felt like a Greek play. Like even the aspects of it really felt like a Greek mythology. Because I mean, I'm not very well versed in different countries' mythology, so let's talk about something that I actually know some level of. So in terms of Greek mythology, you see a lot of like cruelty when it comes to godhood. You see a lot of like, it's not fairy tale like, right, when it comes to any of this stories that are being portrayed in Greek mythology, where like Zeus is actually an asshole and he cheats on his wife Hera with a bunch of like mortals or other lower gods and has a bunch of children with them. It's those kind of cruel aspects in the story that I actually see with even our main god, which is the moon goddess in this book. Like she's actually not that nice of a person. She's kind of cruel. And because at the start of the story we are told that the moon and the water both have like sort of a romantic or love like romantic relationship between each other. At some point in the book, the water actually wanted to sort of kill everyone because you know he or she lost the moon, and that is kind of nasty, you know, because what the hell. But that is so much like what we should picture gods like, especially in mythology such as Greek or Norse, which are the only two that I really, really know. They're actually not as kind as we think. And so it's also portrayed in the three terrors that the moon goddess produces, and three of them have been granted abilities, which we will see throughout the book. I've only explained what the first terror is because he's at the start of the book, but I find that I don't want to go too much into the others because there is that beauty in finding out slowly which brother has what abilities. So, but otherwise, they are also very cruel people in their own right, but also, strangely enough, people that harbor a lot of humanistic qualities. They don't really feel so human because of the way they act. They feel and look like lesser gods in the story, but actually, essentially, they're just what, demigods. Yeah, but they act really cruelly. They're all cruel in their own ways and all kind of gross in their own ways. But yet they have a lot of humanistic characteristics that make you want to pity them, even though you know you shouldn't because they're kind of an asshole. You know, they treat people like shit. That's why I find that all the characters have their own personalities. And at first, while I thought this was a story that portrayed people as good versus evil, the more you read on, you realize that all of these characters are in their own right morally great. Even our heroes have an interesting backstory, and they are also in their own right done bad things in their life, and they are kind of trying to right that wrong in a way. Yeah. The one thing about the writing that I really enjoy is that it has this atmospheric lyrical sense to it. I feel like reading you some passages will actually help you understand why the prose is so mesmerizing. But I think I picked out a pretty good passage. Okay, here we go. This is near the end of the book, but based on it, you shouldn't be too confused. Alright. He was glad he had his last measure of peace before the end, before the water continued to crawl into him and swell up his lungs, and his body went into some great ecstatic thrashing, conversing without breath, and his mind went warm and dull as he wondered if this was what it was like to be held, and how sorry he was that this was how he found out, and how glad he was that it was over. It is that feeling of how, even through that last part of death that the character is experiencing, that all these thoughts happen in his head, almost like this poetic nature, which I find that that's actually what the prose is. It's very mesmerizing and poetic, but it's not confusing. I think with a lot of proper prose is that I find that sometimes they just overdo it. It's like the sun is dripping like an egg yolk or something like that. This is like one of the things that I think Tahara Mafi does a lot with her writing. If you know Tahara Mafi, the author of the Shadow Me series, her writing is practically just purple prose and confusing, and what are we talking about? But Simon Jimenez's writing is not like that. It's poetic. It's almost similar to what's his name? Ocean Vuong's writing. It's very similar to Ocean Vuong's writing, but Ocean Vuong is even more like psychedelic in the way he writes. But Simon Jimenez writes it in a more like, your eyes are open and aware of your surroundings, and this is how your mind can portray the way a single drop of water hits a water surface, that kind of thing. If you get what I mean, I find it so hard to describe, but I'm trying my best to let you know how it actually feels to read his work. So yeah, but as much as I was talking about all the characters, do you know that actually, strangely enough, even though all the three terrors are kind of gross and kind of like iffy in their own ways, that I enjoy the portrayal of their characters the best. To see their backstory and to see the way that they are reacting to situations in the current present time in their story, it feels very real. But it's not really like Simon Jimenez is saying like, let's forgive them for the things that they did. No, he's just telling you like, yeah, they faced some issues in their life, and therefore they are kind of based on that acting the way that they are. But it's not we're not excusing them for the horrible deeds that they're doing. They're just doing it, and it's up to you as a reader whether you feel like they can be excused or they are not to be excused. You know? Oh, another thing that I want to mention, which I think is an issue that always appears in many books, it seems, when it comes to disability, right? So our main character Kima actually has one arm gone. Like, he only has one hand, like one arm to fight. And at some point he sort of comes back and is sort of at some point, let's just say he comes back and he has the chance to reform his body. Not that he can decide how his body is reformed, but it gets reformed, let's just say. And the character says this to him. He says, she says that, except for the arm, and now I cannot help but wonder why you were not remade whole again. And he replies, I am whole, he said flatly. Yeah, so I think that's a very good way of saying that, because sometimes there are situations in fantasy where there is some sort of disability in that world, like it's sort of represented as a disability, but because of magic and they can become what is societal's norm of whole. I think Simon Jimenez did a good job by saying that in the book. So, I gave this a 4.75 out of 5 stars, practically 5 stars, but I'm just docking it a little bit because of the front part where I find it very difficult for me to get into, and I find that it will be very confusing for most people that are entering the story. And it's also probably why a lot of people will end up giving up on the story itself. But otherwise, what do I think about the kind of books that Tammie likes to read? She didn't finish this, but you know what, Tammie, I think you should pick this up again when you are mentally capable of doing so, because I find that you really do have to have the mental capacity to read this. It's a little bit confusing and you sort of have to be in it to win it. But once you get past a certain point in the book, you really get quite invested, and I think this is the kind of book that actually Tammie would enjoy. The kind of books that Tammie likes to read is like she reads most of the Niveau books. And what else? She likes the Grace of Kings, so that means she likes like a historical setting with like a strong political nature. That's what I've heard so far about the Grace of Kings. I can't remember everything that she likes, but I'll put up like what she likes over here. Oh, yeah, I'll put up what she likes over here just to show like the kind of books that she enjoys. I find that this story is something that she might actually enjoy because of its mythical nature. Like the Empress of Sword and Sorrow is also about this storytelling, and it's very fairy tale like, mythical, like I find with what I've read about it. And I think The Spear Cuts Through Water is something quite similar in that storytelling aspect. And I feel like she'll appreciate Simon Jimenez's writing if she just pushes through that initial 100 pages, which I also feel that is the case for most people, unless you really enjoy multiple POVs in your book. She doesn't enjoy first person POVs, just like me. Actually, you know what? I only started to hate it because she talked about it, and then I start to see all the problems with first POVs that I really end up like disliking. So the fact that this is written mostly in actually third person narrative is a good thing for her, because then it's easier for her to progress through the story. And the first person is just like thoughts of a person's head rather than actually a part of the story. So I find that this book Tammie should give a try. But because I picked up a book that Tammie did not necessarily recommend, I'll be doing another video on Tammie again. So if you guys watch Tammie from Tammie Tries to Read, let me know which book that she recommended to you that you enjoyed and you want to read because of her, and maybe I would pick that one instead. But the next book that I'll be picking up from her is actually, hint hint, a Arcane-like book. It's a self-published book that is pitched to be like Arcane, and she talks so highly about it that I decided to also pick it up. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this vlog. I hope I made you want to pick this up. It's really good. Just try it. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!